There is a moment in every power dynamic when the balance becomes clear. It is not when someone raises their voice. Not when someone wins an argument. Not when someone proves they are right. It is the moment when one person realizes they need the other more. From that moment on, control has already shifted. Most people believe power comes from intelligence, charm, talent, or effort. But history, psychology, and human behavior all point to a quieter truth. The person who needs nothing controls everything. This video is about emotional detachment, not as coldness, not as apathy, but as psychological independence. And why, when practiced correctly, it rewires how people perceive you, respond to you, and submit to your presence. This is not self-help. This is not motivation. This is about authority at the psychological level. The invisible hierarchy of need. Every social environment contains an invisible structure. It exists before a word is spoken. Before opinions are exchanged. Before anyone reveals what they want. It is the hierarchy of need. Who needs approval? Who needs reassurance? Who needs agreement? Who needs to be understood? Who needs the outcome to go their way? And just as importantly, who does not? Most people believe power reveals itself through dominance, assertiveness, or intelligence. But in reality, power reveals itself through absence, the absence of need, urgency, and emotional dependence. The moment one person needs something more than the other, the hierarchy quietly locks into place. And it almost never favors the one who wants. This is the foundation of emotional detachment, not as a personality trait, but as a psychological position. The unconscious negotiation. Every interaction is a negotiation, even when no one acknowledges it. Two people meet. Two minds assess. Two nervous systems exchange signals. And beneath the surface, each person is asking the same silent questions. Who is affected here? Who is steady? Who is seeking something? Who is complete? You can speak confidently. You can dress well. You can articulate your thoughts perfectly. But if you need the interaction to validate you, the body reveals it. The voice tightens. The eyes search. The reactions become faster, sharper, defensive. This is not a failure of discipline, it is biology. Humans evolved to detect dependency because dependency creates vulnerability. And vulnerability, in social hierarchies, often signals lower position. The mind may hide it. The body does not. Why neediness is always felt. Psychology has a term for this: emotional contingency. It refers to when a person's emotional stability depends on external feedback, approval, agreement, attention, or outcome. When your internal state depends on how others respond, you are no longer self-contained. And self-containment is the root of authority. People may not consciously label someone as needy, but they feel it immediately. The urgency in speech. The over-explaining. The inability to tolerate silence. The desire to resolve tension quickly. All of these are signals. And signals determine rank long before logic enters the room. This is why two people can say the same words, yet one commands attention while the other seeks it. The paradox of power. Here is the paradox most people never resolve. The more you want to be powerful, the less powerful you appear. Because wanting power usually means wanting something from others: respect, recognition, validation, dominance. And the moment you want something from someone, you give them leverage. Power does not come from wanting to control. It comes from not needing to be controlled by outcomes. The emotionally detached individual is dangerous not because they dominate, but because they are not dominated. They are not rushed by silence. They are not shaken by disagreement. They are not altered by rejection. They remain psychologically intact regardless of response. And this creates an imbalance. Why people chase what they can't move. Human beings are drawn to stability the same way water is drawn to gravity. In uncertain environments, people seek anchors. When someone is emotionally detached, calm, grounded, unreactive, others instinctively orient around them. Not because the detached person demands attention, but because the nervous system recognizes this person is not threatened. And the one who is not threatened often becomes the reference point. This is why leaders are often the calmest in chaos. This is why experienced negotiators speak less. This is why confident individuals do not rush to clarify. They are not fighting for position. They already occupy it. The cost of over-attachment. Modern culture subtly encourages emotional over-attachment. Be expressive. Be open. Be responsive. Explain yourself. Seek closure. But in social dynamics, constant emotional exposure comes at a cost. When you overinvest emotionally, you reveal what moves you. You reveal where you are fragile. You reveal what you need. And once that information exists, leverage exists. This does not mean vulnerability is weakness. It means unregulated vulnerability creates imbalance. The emotionally detached person is not closed, they are selective. They decide what enters their internal world. Detachment as self-sovereignty. Emotional detachment is not distance from others. It is sovereignty over self. It is the refusal to allow praise to inflate you, criticism to destabilize you, silence to provoke you, rejection to define you. This is not arrogance. It is containment. When your emotional state no longer fluctuates based on external input, you become psychologically opaque. Others cannot read you easily. They cannot predict your reactions. They cannot steer you with pressure. And uncertainty always shifts power. Why calmness signals authority? Calmness is often misunderstood as passivity. But calmness under pressure signals something very specific to the human brain. Experience. Control. Safety. When someone remains calm in tension, the subconscious conclusion is simple. They've been here before. And experience outranks enthusiasm every time. This is why emotionally detached individuals often rise in influence without effort. Their nervous system communicates stability, and stability attracts trust. Not emotional trust. Structural trust. The kind that positions someone as a reference point rather than a participant. The moment the shift begins. At some point, something subtle happens internally. You stop reacting to fill space. You stop explaining to be understood. You stop adjusting to be accepted. You begin to pause. And in that pause, power starts returning inward. Because the moment you no longer need the interaction to go a certain way, you are no longer controlled by it. You can walk away. You can remain silent. You can choose response instead of reflex. That is emotional detachment at its root. The unseen consequence. Here is what few people realize. When you stop needing others emotionally, others begin to orient around you. Not consciously. Not intentionally. But neurologically. Because the human brain is wired to defer to what feels stable. And stability, in social dynamics, is power. Emotional detachment is not about isolation. It is about removing the invisible hooks that allow others to pull you off center. When nothing external can shake your internal state, you become difficult to manipulate, difficult to rush, and difficult to dominate. And in every hierarchy, spoken or unspoken, the one who is hardest to move holds the advantage. This is the foundation. In the next chapter, we will dismantle the biggest misconception of all. Why emotional detachment is not coldness, and why most people fail by trying to fake it instead of building it. Why emotional detachment is not coldness. Most people misunderstand emotional detachment the moment they hear the word. They imagine distance. Silence as punishment. Indifference as superiority. A cold, unfeeling posture designed to intimidate or dominate. This misunderstanding is not harmless. It causes people to imitate the appearance of detachment while remaining emotionally dependent underneath, which produces tension, bitterness, and eventually collapse. True emotional detachment does not harden you. It stabilizes you. And the difference between those two states is everything. The dangerous imitation. When people try to be detached, they often do the following. They withdraw abruptly. They suppress emotion. They stop expressing warmth. They force stillness instead of earning it. Outwardly, they appear calm. Internally, they are resisting. This creates a psychological contradiction. The body is tense while the face pretends not to care. And human beings detect this instantly. Forced detachment feels brittle. It feels sharp. It feels unsafe. Because it is not rooted in emotional independence, it is rooted in fear of vulnerability. Why suppression fails? Emotional suppression is not detachment. Suppression is an act of force. Detachment is an act of ownership. When you suppress emotions, you are still controlled by them, you are simply pushing them underground. The nervous system does not forget. Suppressed emotion leaks out as passive aggression, sudden irritation, overreaction to small triggers, emotional exhaustion. And over time, suppression fractures authority instead of building it. People may feel something is off. They may feel tension in your presence. They may feel resistance instead of calm. True detachment feels clean, not tight. The core difference. Here is the distinction that changes everything. Coldness is emotional avoidance. Detachment is emotional self-sufficiency. Coldness is defensive. Detachment is grounded. Coldness says, I can't let this affect me. Detachment says, this does not own me. One is fragile. The other is immovable. Emotional access versus emotional dependence. Detached individuals are not emotionally unavailable. They are emotionally non-dependent. They can feel deeply without being destabilized. They can care without clinging. They can engage without surrendering internal control. This is why emotionally detached people often feel safe to be around. They don't pull. They don't push. They don't need reassurance to stay regulated. Their emotions belong to them, not to the situation. Why people confuse intensity with depth. Modern culture often equates emotional intensity with emotional authenticity. Big reactions mean big feelings. Strong expression means truth. Immediate response means care. But intensity is not depth. In fact, intensity often signals lack of regulation, not sincerity. Depth is quiet. Depth is steady. Depth does not demand performance. Emotionally detached individuals still feel, they simply do not externalize everything they experience. They choose what becomes visible. And choice is power. The stability others feel. When emotional detachment is real, people around you experience something subtle. They don't feel managed. They don't feel evaluated. They don't feel pressured to respond correctly. There is space. That space allows others to relax their nervous systems, and when that happens, influence increases naturally. People open up more. They speak more freely. They seek your perspective without being prompted. Because calm presence invites projection. And projection is the doorway to authority. Why reactive people lose position? Reactivity is the enemy of detachment. The reactive person needs to correct misunderstandings immediately. Needs to defend themselves. Needs to be seen accurately. Needs to resolve discomfort fast. This creates a constant loop of emotional movement. And movement signals instability. The emotionally detached person does not rush to stabilize perception. They allow misunderstanding to exist. They allow silence to linger. They allow others to reveal themselves first. Not out of strategy, but out of security. Detachment and warmth can coexist. This is the mistake most people never unlearn. They believe emotional detachment requires emotional withdrawal. In reality, detachment allows controlled warmth. You can be kind without seeking approval. You can listen without absorbing emotion. You can empathize without merging identities. This balance is rare, and therefore magnetic. People feel seen without feeling responsible for you. That combination creates respect. Why fake detachment backfires? When detachment is forced, people sense tension behind the calm, judgment behind the silence, insecurity behind the distance. This produces resistance. Others feel they must break through you, or protect themselves from you. Either way, authority dissolves. True detachment does not create distance, it creates neutral ground. And neutral ground is where influence quietly forms. The internal shift that matters. Real detachment begins internally, not behaviorally. It begins when your worth is no longer negotiated socially. Your mood is no longer rented to outcomes. Your identity is no longer shaped by reaction. You stop needing to perform stability. You become stable. And the behaviors follow automatically. Less explanation. Slower responses. Fewer emotional spikes. More silence without discomfort. This is not strategy. It is consequence. Why detached people speak less? Emotionally detached individuals do not speak less because they are withholding. They speak less because they do not feel compelled. They do not need to fill gaps, prove intelligence, secure agreement, defend position. Their words are not tools of reassurance. They are tools of clarity. And clarity carries weight. The misconception of not caring. Detachment is not apathy. Apathy is disengagement. Detachment is engagement without entanglement. Detached individuals care, but they do not collapse into what they care about. They remain centered. This allows them to act rationally where others react emotionally. And rational action under emotional pressure is rare, which is why it commands respect. The invisible advantage. When you are emotionally detached, praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't provoke you. Silence doesn't threaten you. Rejection doesn't define you. This emotional neutrality confuses people who rely on emotional leverage. They can't pull you forward or push you away. So they adapt to you instead. And adaptation is submission's quiet cousin. Emotional detachment is not emotional absence. It is emotional mastery. It is the difference between controlling emotion and being controlled by it. When you no longer need to protect yourself emotionally, you no longer broadcast fragility. And when fragility disappears, authority appears, quietly, steadily, without demand. In the next chapter, we will examine why silence becomes a weapon only when you stop fearing it, and how emotional detachment transforms silence from discomfort into dominance. The power of silence when you no longer need to be heard. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forces in human interaction. Most people experience silence as absence. Absence of validation. Absence of connection. Absence of control. To them, silence feels dangerous. So they fill it. They explain. They justify. They react. They rush to be understood. And in doing so, they give away the very power they are trying to protect. Why silence makes people uncomfortable. Silence exposes emotional dependence. When there is no immediate feedback, no reassurance, no reaction, the nervous system begins to search for meaning. Am I approved of? Am I rejected? Am I being judged? Did I say something wrong? For emotionally dependent individuals, silence is not neutral, it is threatening. Because silence removes their ability to regulate themselves through others. The detached person experiences silence differently. For the emotionally detached individual, silence is not a void. It is a position. They do not rush to fill space because their internal state does not require stimulation to remain stable. They are not uncomfortable waiting. They are not unsettled by pauses. They are not anxious about how they are perceived in the moment. Their nervous system is self-contained. And that containment creates gravity. Why silence signals control? Control is not dominance through force. Control is the ability to remain steady while others adjust. When you are silent without tension, others lean in. Others speak more. Others reveal uncertainty. Because silence removes reference points. And when reference points disappear, people orient toward the most grounded presence in the room. That presence becomes the frame. The difference between awkward silence and powerful silence. Not all silence is powerful. Awkward silence is filled with internal noise. Self-consciousness. Fear of judgment. Desire to escape. Powerful silence is internally quiet. There is no urgency inside it. No need to perform. No need to resolve discomfort. No need to manage perception. The body remains relaxed. The breath remains slow. The posture remains open. This is the silence people respond to, not because it intimidates, but because it stabilizes. Why reactive speech dissolves authority? When someone reacts quickly, emotionally, or defensively, they reveal something important. They are not choosing their words, they are being moved by the moment. This makes them predictable. And predictability reduces influence. Emotionally detached individuals allow time between stimulus and response. That delay is not hesitation. It is autonomy. The pause that resets power. There is a moment after someone speaks, a fraction of time where most people rush to reply. Detached individuals pause. That pause does three things simultaneously. It signals self-control. It forces the other person to sit with their own words. It establishes emotional pacing. Whoever controls the pace controls the interaction. Silence slows the tempo. And when tempo slows, impulsive people lose advantage. Why silence invites projection? Human beings are meaning-making machines. When information is missing, they fill the gap. Silence becomes a mirror. People project authority, judgment, curiosity, interest, disinterest onto the silent individual. And once projection begins, influence increases. Because people respond not to who you are, but to who they believe you are. The most powerful people speak last. Those with true authority rarely rush to speak first. They observe. They listen. They allow others to reveal motivations, insecurities, and positions. By the time they speak, the landscape is already mapped. Their words land with precision, not volume. This is why their statements feel final. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just settled. Silence as emotional filter. Emotionally detached individuals do not express every emotion they feel. Not because they suppress, but because they choose. Silence acts as a filter. Only what matters passes through. This creates fewer words, clearer intent, higher impact. And higher impact speech is remembered. Why people mistake silence for confidence. Confidence is often misdefined as assertiveness. In reality, confidence is comfort without validation. Silence demonstrates that comfort visibly. When you are silent without shrinking, others assume you know something they don't. You are not threatened. You are evaluating rather than reacting. These assumptions elevate status without effort. The psychology of not defending yourself. Defensiveness is a signal of emotional investment in perception. When you defend yourself immediately, you communicate. This matters to me more than I want it to. Detached individuals allow misunderstandings to exist temporarily. They do not rush to correct. Because truth does not require urgency. And those who are secure do not chase clarity. Why silence makes others talk themselves into weakness. When someone speaks into silence, they often reveal more than intended. They explain. They justify. They backtrack. They fill space. Each additional word exposes uncertainty. Detached silence allows this process to unfold naturally. You do not extract information. You allow it to surface. The calm body is the message. Silence only works when the body supports it. If the body is tense, silence feels hostile. If the body is relaxed, silence feels grounded. Detached individuals. Keep shoulders loose. Breathe slowly. Maintain neutral posture. Avoid defensive gestures. The body communicates safety, even when words are absent. This combination disarms rather than threatens. Why silence is unavailable to the needy. Silence requires emotional independence. If you need approval, silence feels unbearable. If you need reassurance, silence feels dangerous. If you need control, silence feels like loss. Only when you need nothing can silence become neutral. And neutrality is where power lives. The strategic result of silence. When you are comfortable with silence, people seek your reaction. Your words gain value. Your absence becomes noticeable. Your presence becomes grounding. You do not demand attention. Attention orients toward you naturally. The invisible shift. At a certain point, something changes. You stop thinking about silence as a tactic. It becomes your default state. You speak when there is value. You remain quiet when there is not. And others adapt to your rhythm. This is not manipulation. It is leadership through emotional stability. Silence is not powerful because it intimidates. Silence is powerful because it reveals who cannot tolerate it. When you no longer need to be heard. No longer need to explain. No longer need to react. Your presence becomes the message. In the next chapter, we will explore how emotional detachment reshapes authority, making people defer to you without being asked, and why those who need approval can never hold power for long. 4. Authority without approval. Why the detached lead naturally. Authority is commonly misunderstood. Most people believe authority is granted. That it comes from titles, recognition, or permission. That it is something bestowed by others. But true authority emerges long before recognition. It forms in silence. It is felt before it is acknowledged. And it belongs almost exclusively to those who do not need approval. Why approval seeking weakens presence. Approval seeking creates a subtle imbalance in every interaction. When you seek validation, your behavior bends. Your tone softens unnaturally. Your opinions adjust in real time. Your posture reveals hesitation. Even when the words sound confident, the energy does not match. Humans are extraordinarily sensitive to this mismatch. They feel it before they can name it. And when they feel it, they unconsciously assume. This person is not leading, they are responding. The invisible cost of wanting to be liked. Wanting to be liked seems harmless. Even admirable. But psychologically, it comes at a price. To be liked, you must remain readable. Predictable. Non-threatening. You must explain yourself. Clarify your intentions. Signal friendliness at all times. This constant signaling consumes authority. Detached individuals do not remove warmth. They remove the need to perform warmth. That difference changes everything. Why people follow emotional stability, not charisma. Charisma is often celebrated as the source of leadership. But charisma without stability creates dependence, not respect. People may be drawn to charismatic individuals, but they do not trust them under pressure. Emotional stability, on the other hand, creates safety. When someone remains calm regardless of outcome, others unconsciously hand them leadership. Not because they demand it, but because they anchor the environment. The authority of non-reaction. Non-reaction is not passivity. It is selectivity. Detached individuals do not react to everything. Only to what matters. This forces others to adjust. When someone insults you and you do not flinch, they feel the imbalance. When someone challenges you and you remain steady, they begin to doubt their leverage. Non-reaction removes emotional fuel from power struggles. Without fuel, dominance games collapse. Why detached people are seen as natural leaders. People often describe emotionally detached individuals as calm, centered, natural leaders, grounded. But what they are really responding to is absence of need. Need creates pressure. Pressure creates tension. Tension makes people uncomfortable. Detachment removes pressure. And comfort follows. People follow what makes them feel regulated. The psychology of deference. Deference does not come from fear alone. It comes from trust in emotional containment. When people sense that you will not overreact, collapse emotionally, seek reassurance, become volatile, they defer. Because in moments of uncertainty, they look for the least reactive nervous system in the room. That nervous system becomes the guide. Why explaining yourself erodes authority. Explanation is often an attempt to manage perception. But authority does not require explanation. Detached individuals allow misunderstanding to exist. They do not rush to correct narratives. They do not chase consensus. This restraint signals internal alignment. People trust those who are aligned within themselves. The power of being unmoved by outcomes. The most powerful shift occurs when outcomes no longer control you. Detached individuals care. But they are not emotionally hostage to results. Whether they are accepted or rejected, praised or ignored, they remain intact. This creates a paradox. Because they do not chase outcomes, outcomes often move toward them. Why people test the detached. People test those who do not seek approval. They provoke. They challenge. They push boundaries. Not out of hostility, but curiosity. They want to know. Will this person crack? When the detached individual remains calm, the test ends. Respect replaces resistance. The leader who does not need to lead. The most effective leaders rarely announce themselves. They do not dominate conversation. They do not assert authority verbally. They do not demand compliance. They move slowly. Speak deliberately. Choose moments carefully. Others begin to mirror them unconsciously. Leadership emerges without declaration. Emotional distance as clarity. Detachment allows clearer perception. Without emotional interference. You see motivations, insecurities, power plays, underlying dynamics. You are not pulled into emotional narratives. You observe from above the current. And those who can see clearly are trusted to decide. Why neediness makes others uncomfortable. When someone needs approval, others feel responsible for their emotional state. This creates subtle resentment. Detached individuals remove this burden. They do not need reassurance. They do not require validation. They do not seek emotional rescue. This emotional self-sufficiency feels freeing to others. And freedom creates loyalty. Authority is a byproduct of self-sovereignty. Authority does not come from commanding others. It comes from commanding yourself. When your emotions are regulated, your desires disciplined, your reactions chosen, others recognize sovereignty. They respond to it instinctively. The role of stillness in command. Stillness communicates certainty. Detached individuals move less, gesture less, speak less. Every action carries weight. This economy of movement signals intention. People trust intention over intensity. Why detachment is not coldness. Detachment is often mistaken for indifference. But true detachment allows deeper empathy. Because you are not overwhelmed by emotion. You can understand it. You can listen without absorbing. Care without clinging. Support without losing position. This balance creates respect. The unasked authority. At a certain level, something changes. People begin to check with you. Without you asking. They pause to see your reaction. They wait for your signal. They adjust based on your presence. This is authority without demand. Approval is a currency of the insecure. Those who no longer trade in it become scarce. And scarcity increases value. When you no longer need permission to be yourself, others grant you authority automatically. In the next chapter, we will explore how emotional detachment reshapes relationships, attraction, and loyalty, and why those who need nothing are the hardest to replace. 5. Why needing nothing makes you irreplaceable. Most people believe value is created by effort. They believe being useful, agreeable, available, or generous is what makes them important. But usefulness is not what makes someone irreplaceable. Dependence is common. Neediness is abundant. Availability is cheap. What is rare, and therefore powerful, is self-sufficiency. The difference between being valued and being needed. Being valued feels good. Being needed feels powerful. But neither creates security. When you are needed, you are tolerated. When you are valued, you are appreciated. When you need nothing, you are respected. Respect is the only form of value that does not decay. Why dependence creates disposability. Dependence always creates leverage, just not in your favor. The more someone senses that you need their attention, you require their validation, you depend on their approval, the more they unconsciously downgrade your position. Not out of cruelty. Out of instinct. Humans evolved to follow stability, not attachment. The irony of need. The more you need something, the less you are trusted with it. Needing signals instability. Instability signals risk. This is why emotionally detached individuals are trusted with responsibility, intimacy, leadership, and influence. They do not grasp. They do not cling. They do not pressure. They allow. Why emotional self-sufficiency creates gravity. People move toward what does not pull them. This is one of the most counterintuitive truths of human psychology. When you stop reaching, others lean in. When you stop chasing, attention stabilizes. When you stop proving, presence speaks. Detached individuals create psychological gravity. They do not orbit others. Others orbit them. The power of non-attachment in relationships. In relationships, romantic, social, professional, attachment often masquerades as care. But attachment is not care. It is fear of loss. Detached individuals can care deeply, without fear. They enjoy connection without clinging to outcome. This makes them safe. And safety is addictive. Why people test your need level? People unconsciously test how much you need them. They delay responses. They withdraw warmth. They shift availability. They are not being malicious. They are gathering information. If you panic, pursue, or explain, you fail the test. If you remain steady, you pass. Steadiness is the signal of replaceability or power. When someone can be easily emotionally destabilized, they are easily replaced. Not because they lack value, but because they lack containment. Detached individuals contain themselves. They do not leak anxiety. They do not outsource emotional regulation. They do not collapse under ambiguity. This makes them reliable. Reliability creates irreplaceability. Why needing nothing removes manipulation? Manipulation only works on people who need something. Approval, affection, recognition, security. When you need nothing, manipulation has no entry point. This does not make you aggressive or dominant. It makes you unmovable. And unmovable people change environments simply by existing. The paradox of emotional availability. Detached individuals are often more emotionally present, not less. Because they are not overwhelmed by their own need. They can focus outward. They listen fully. Respond thoughtfully. Engage without agenda. This makes others feel seen, without being consumed. Why people return to the detached? People drift back to those who do not demand emotional labor. Detached individuals do not punish distance. They do not guilt absence. They do not keep score. This absence of pressure creates space. And space is where longing grows. Emotional autonomy as social power. Emotional autonomy is not isolation. It is independence within connection. Detached individuals enjoy relationships, but are not defined by them. They do not collapse when connections shift. They adapt. This adaptability makes them durable. Why durability is the highest form of value. Skills can be replaced. Roles can be filled. Functions can be automated. But durability, the ability to remain stable across change, cannot be replicated. Detached individuals endure. They are not shaken by rejection. They are not inflated by praise. They are not broken by uncertainty. They last. The silent respect people never verbalize. People rarely say, "I respect you because you don't need me." But they feel it. They trust you more. Confide more. Consult more. Listen more. Not because you demand it, but because you do not. Why emotional detachment creates loyalty. Paradoxically, detachment creates loyalty. Because loyalty given freely feels powerful. Loyalty demanded feels forced. Detached individuals allow choice. And people protect what they choose freely. The moment you become irreplaceable. Irreplaceability does not happen loudly. It happens quietly. People begin to check for your presence. Notice your absence. Value your input without prompting. You do not assert importance. It is assigned to you. Why this power is invisible. This form of power does not announce itself. It does not intimidate. It does not dominate. It does not perform. It stabilizes. And stability is rare in a reactive world. Needing nothing does not make you empty. It makes you complete. And completeness is magnetic. Those who need nothing become the ones others cannot replace. 6. Psychological immunity. why the detached cannot be controlled. Control does not begin with force. It begins with access. To control a person, you must first gain access to their emotions, their fears, their desires, their need for validation, their hunger for certainty. Without that access, power has nowhere to land. This is why emotional detachment is not just a personal discipline. It is psychological immunity. How control really works. Most people imagine control as something external: commands, threats, rules, pressure. But real control is subtle. It enters through the need to be liked, the fear of being excluded, the anxiety of losing status, the discomfort of uncertainty. Once those doors are open, influence flows freely. Detached individuals close those doors. Why provocation is the first test. When someone wants power over you, they almost always begin with provocation. A remark. A challenge. A dismissal. A subtle insult. The goal is not conflict. The goal is reaction. Reaction reveals leverage. Reaction is information. The moment you react emotionally, you disclose what you care about, what destabilizes you, what you fear losing. To a manipulative mind, this is a map. Detached individuals offer no map. They do not flinch. They do not rush to correct. They do not defend their identity. They observe. Why emotional stillness disarms others. Stillness creates uncertainty. Uncertainty destabilizes those who seek control. When someone cannot read you, they cannot predict you. When they cannot predict you, they cannot manage you. Detached individuals introduce ambiguity into every power dynamic. This alone shifts the balance. The difference between strength and immunity. Strength resists pressure. Immunity renders pressure irrelevant. Most people try to become stronger, more assertive, more confident, more dominant. Detached individuals do something quieter. They remove the hooks. How people lose power without realizing it. Power is often lost through explanation. Defending intentions. Clarifying feelings. Justifying actions. Each explanation is an emotional transaction. It says, I care about how this lands. I need to be understood. I am invested in your approval. Detached individuals do not withhold information to be cruel. They withhold it to remain sovereign. Why being misunderstood is a form of protection. Being understood feels comforting. But it also makes you predictable. Predictability is exploitable. Detached individuals accept misunderstanding without urgency. They allow others to project. Assume. Speculate. Because none of it touches their center. The role of emotional economy. Every interaction has an emotional economy. Someone spends energy. Someone gains leverage. When you argue, you spend. When you explain, you spend. When you react, you spend. Detached individuals conserve. They speak only when movement is required. They respond only when direction is necessary. This restraint creates authority. Why detachment makes you unmanipulatable? Manipulation requires one of two things. Desire. Fear. If you desire approval, you can be flattered. If you fear rejection, you can be threatened. Detached individuals minimize both. They enjoy appreciation, but do not rely on it. They acknowledge loss, but do not fear it. This balance makes manipulation inefficient. The silent shift in power dynamics. When others realize they cannot provoke you, they adjust. When they realize you cannot be pressured, they pause. When they realize you do not need them, they recalibrate. This recalibration is respect. Why calmness is misread as confidence. Calmness is often mistaken for confidence. But calmness is deeper. Confidence can be shaken. Calmness cannot. Detached individuals remain calm because they are not defending a fragile identity. They are not trying to win. They are not trying to prove. They are not trying to survive the moment. They are present. How detachment changes the social frame. In any group, someone sets the emotional tone. The reactive follow the reactive. The anxious follow the anxious. Detached individuals introduce a new frame. Their steadiness becomes the reference point. Others begin to mirror it, unconsciously. This is influence without effort. Why detached people are hard to discredit. To discredit someone, you must provoke inconsistency. Emotional outbursts. Contradictions. Defensiveness. Detached individuals are internally consistent. They do not scramble to maintain image. They do not chase narratives. They let time clarify truth. This patience makes them durable. The power of delayed response. One of the most underestimated forms of power is delay. Not avoidance. Not silence for effect. But deliberate pause. Detached individuals do not rush responses because they do not fear outcomes. This delay forces others to sit with uncertainty. And uncertainty reveals motivation. Why emotional detachment protects your identity. When your identity is fused with outcomes, every challenge feels personal. Detached individuals separate who they are from what happens. Failure does not threaten them. Criticism does not define them. Praise does not inflate them. Their identity remains intact. This integrity is armor. The invisible wall around the detached. People sense when access is limited. Not blocked. Not denied. Just, unavailable. This boundary creates safety. It says, you may interact, but you may not enter. This distinction preserves autonomy. Why this immunity is quiet. Psychological immunity does not announce itself. It does not intimidate. It does not posture. It does not dominate. It simply refuses to be moved. And in a world built on reaction, immovability becomes power. Those who master emotional detachment do not seek control. They make control unnecessary. They are not harder. They are quieter. And quiet people with boundaries are the most difficult to manipulate. 7. The reconstructed self, how detachment rewrites identity. Most people believe identity is something they discover. In reality, identity is something they inherit. From parents. From culture. From early approval and rejection. From what worked once, and was never questioned again. Emotional detachment does not polish this inherited self. It dismantles it. Why the old self was never truly yours. The personality you once called you was largely reactive. It formed around what gained approval. What avoided conflict. What reduced uncertainty. What preserved belonging. This self was adaptive, but fragile. It survived by negotiating with the world. Detached individuals stop negotiating. Detachment as identity death. Emotional detachment feels unsettling at first because it removes familiar anchors. The urge to explain. The reflex to defend. The need to be recognized. The fear of being misread. These impulses once defined you. When they dissolve, there is a void. This void is not emptiness. It is freedom. Why most people fear this stage? At this point, many retreat. They mistake the loss of emotional reflexes for loss of self. They rush back to habits. To noise. To validation. Detached individuals remain. They allow the old identity to collapse without replacing it immediately. This patience is rare. The quiet emergence of a new center. As emotional noise fades, something stabilizes. Not ego. Not confidence. Not ambition. Orientation. Detached individuals stop asking, "How am I being perceived?" They begin asking, "What is required now?" This shift rewires identity from reactive to intentional. Why the new self does not perform. The reconstructed self does not announce transformation. There is no display. No rebrand. No performance of superiority. The change is internal. But its effects are external. Others sense composure, depth, decisiveness, restraint. Without being told. The end of emotional role play. Most social identities are roles. The agreeable one. The intelligent one. The reliable one. The rebellious one. Detached individuals abandon roles. They respond situationally. Not theatrically. This unpredictability removes easy categorization. And what cannot be categorized cannot be controlled. Why detachment creates inner authority. Authority is often misunderstood as dominance. But dominance seeks compliance. Authority inspires alignment. Detached individuals develop authority because they no longer outsource decision-making to emotional pressure. They decide from clarity. Not urgency. Others feel this difference. The shift from seeking to setting standards. The old self sought acceptance. The reconstructed self sets standards. Not verbally. Not aggressively. Through behavior. What is tolerated? What is ignored? What receives attention? What does not? This silent filtering reshapes relationships. Why people adjust around you. Detached individuals do not ask others to change. Others change automatically. They speak more carefully. They over-explain less. They test boundaries less frequently. Not out of fear. But because the frame has shifted. The end of emotional entanglement. The reconstructed self does not entangle identity with outcomes. Success does not define them. Failure does not destabilize them. Conflict does not consume them. This separation creates resilience. They bend without breaking. Why this self is hard to attack. You cannot attack what does not defend itself. Criticism requires reaction. Insults require insecurity. Provocation requires ego. Detached individuals provide none. Attacks dissolve without impact. The calm that replaces confidence. Confidence fluctuates. It rises with success. Falls with failure. Calm does not. Detached individuals do not feel powerful. They feel unthreatened. This is a deeper state. The reconstructed self is not cold. Detachment is often mistaken for coldness. In truth, the reconstructed self feels more. But reacts less. Emotions are experienced internally. Processed privately. Expressed selectively. This creates emotional precision. Why this self attracts without chasing. The reconstructed self does not pursue attention. Attention gravitates. Not because of mystery alone. But because stability is rare. People are drawn to those who seem anchored. The moment you realize you have changed. There is no dramatic realization. No declaration. Just a quiet noticing. Situations that once triggered you no longer do. Silence no longer feels uncomfortable. Misunderstanding no longer feels threatening. Absence no longer feels like loss. This is the point of no return. Why the old world feels loud now. Detached individuals notice how reactive the world is. The urgency. The defensiveness. The emotional bargaining. They no longer participate. This creates distance. But also clarity. The final form of power. The reconstructed self does not seek dominance. It becomes a reference point. Others measure themselves against it. Consciously or not. This is influence without effort. Why this transformation is irreversible. Once you experience identity without emotional dependency, you cannot return. Need feels foreign. Reaction feels inefficient. Attachment feels heavy. You move forward lighter. Emotional detachment does not make you less human. It makes you ungovernable. You are no longer shaped by reaction. No longer defined by approval. No longer limited by fear. You are directed. From within. And that is the quiet power most never learn to wield.